present. Please join us in the pledge of allegiance to the flag. Next item on the agenda is comments from the community. Mr. Beasy, I see you back there. Come on up.
Doral Beasley, good evening. When's your next scheduled meeting? All right, so if it happens, if the miracle happens and I make it, then I won't be coming to these. So do I have 10 more votes now? Oh, so you have to live here. That's right. We'll be on the opposite sides of the. Yeah. All right. So I'm here tonight with good news and some other news, but what do you want to start with? All right, other news. All right, so did everybody get one? All right, so this is just a quick explanation of the property tax transfers to the school district over the last really like 15 years or a little bit more. And what I wanted to show is in the bottom, those last 6 years in green, which started actually the year before was, the 55,994 they've gotten for 5 years in a row. So the year before it was like $1 million less. But anyway, so what it shows is the increase. So what I did was I took property tax transfer and I divided it by the average daily membership, the number of students for that year, and it comes up with a number. So then in the per pupil shares are in the right column. So so when you go down to on the bottom right, you'll see the 6245. So 6245, $6,245 is the increase in the per pupil cost for those 6 years in green. And those are 5 of those 6 years, you had what you call level funding. And the per pupil cost increase over the 12 years above it in blue, $6,333. So I believe that's one way of looking at the increase is And the increase, so for those 6 years, the increase when it was, that's at the bottom there, 32.5%, like 33%. So in 6 years, cost per student from the property tax transfer went up 33%. And that's way and above both what you've been showing on your budgets as far as what your budget is increasing. And also it's above what the state allows for communities to have for a tax increase, which is capped at 4%. So this and then the last thing is students per full-time employee ratio. So when you go back to 2014-15, the ratio had been increasing in the years prior. So we hit the 2014-15, and then that's when the DLI program started. So then it started to come down. Ratio got lower. Then Dr. Springfield's last year, it went up. And I believe that that was, anyway, that was a problem because I think that's one of the reasons why she decided time to go. And now in those 5 years, 6 years since, it's gone down, 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 down. Now that's where the problem is. Is that at 5.75%, at 5.75 students per employee, that's like private school numbers. All right, so there it is, folks. The RICAS results. Now, if you look over on the left side, you see that 2023 RICAS assessments. And when you go down and see where South Kingston in the blue last year, for K to 12 districts, so we had a combined score of 988. K to 12 districts, we were tied for 15th out of 36 on the combined score total. And for K to 8 districts, which includes the charter schools and the school districts that don't go any higher than 8th, we were tied for 22nd out of 52. Now, let's go to the right. Oh, and yeah. So over here, you get a little bit more information. So our new score went from 988 to 997. K to 12, we're now tied for 8th out of 36. Tied for 13th out of 52 for K to 8. And the change from 23, so the score went up nine points total. And then the next two columns are those are the math and ELA scores from the year before the pandemic. And that's the year that RIDE is comparing what's going on now to it. So when you add those two, you get 1003. And So for the learning loss, we're still in the -6 column, but okay, we're headed in the right direction. You're headed in the right direction. So I hope you continue to do that. And lastly, so if this is my last time in front of you in this capacity, I just wanted to tell you that I've enjoyed most all of it. We had a few bumps along the way, but I it's really become my full-time retirement job, trying to help this town and this school district, and I've loved it. So thank you uh, for listening, and thank you for letting me to come up here on the nights when I always walk in late.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Is there anyone else that would like to come to the podium and make a comment? Come on up.
Why, hello. My name is Jocelyn Foy. I'm a community member. I just got to vote today, so I have to say I'm very excited about this election. But I wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you and goodbye to Council Member Melissa Boyd. And we want to thank you for your service and the work you've done for our town. It's been incredible, especially for a lot of the students who are not streamlined in the main system. You've taken good care of them. And from all the parents who have children that are like that, we really appreciate you. So thank you.
If there's no one else that has an interest to step up to the podium and make a comment, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Next item on the agenda is our superintendent's report. I'll pass that over to Mr. Pagazza.
Good evening. Next slide, please. So there are two main items in my report this week. There are two under personnel, one which you will find familiar in terms of the action form. The other is not placed on there, but it is a listing of the intramural appointments coming from Athletic Director Lynch. I would like to say thank you. We do have a retirement from this building, Regina Trinkwald, administrative specialist here at the high school. Had an opportunity actually to speak with her last week and congratulate her and wish her well, thank her for her multiple decades of service and wish her the best as she retires in the new year. She will be missed, and I'm sure we will recognize her amongst other retirees later on, but wish her the best and wonderful times with her grandchildren that she told me that she would be spending time with. In other updates, I have been meeting weekly with Mandy Bozarth in terms of the equity audit. Today we were joined, or this week we were also joined by Stanley Rabinowitz because we had a data analysis focus. We are still going. I know it's taking a long time for the data sharing agreement, but it's becoming increasingly clear that they may have all of the data that they need, or most of it. And because RIDE is now making so much of the assessment data, so much of what we have, as demonstrated and public comment, that so much is available in terms of breaking down by demographic factors, by student groups. However, there's also another component that we're kicking around here in that in terms of the data analysis, while we want their expertise from EdMetric and Westwind and want to see what they have to say outside of influence from us. It's also very important that we come away with practices and analysis of data that is replicable. And so we are most recently, earlier this morning, discussing how we could be involved by having our building principals and administrators going through exercises with some of our data that we have already, going through the EdMetric protocols alongside them, along with them, to make sure that not only are they running the analysis and they tell us about the past, but that we are doing it with them and can not only do the same analysis of our past, but also do it of our present, as well as continue to implement it in the future. In doing so, this ties in, or is once again, a long way around the barn, to the data sharing agreement, because if our educators or our administrators who have the educational right to that data are going through a protocol with data that we are entitled to, we're not sharing it per se with them. We would be sharing potentially the conclusions of our own analysis as informed by their protocols. We would not be turning it over to someone, to a third party. And so it's something that we're kicking around and that we're going to investigate. Now, again, that would not be all of it. It would just be certain metrics. So I'm encouraged by this development, or want to look further into it, because again, we then don't just rely on an outside vendor. It also allows us to take a look at what we've done and what we have in place, and the data analysis that has been done by current administrators and past administrators, as well as, again, take a look at our current practice, measure those against experts in the field, and again, potentially implement those moving forward. So again, further discussion, nothing's carved in stone, but almost like embedding some professional development and best practices in addition to the audit that's going forward. And so that was the context of our conversations today. The data sharing agreement from EdMetric has gone to Westwind, and I do anticipate it coming to us rather soon. In terms of the only other piece that, in terms of the data analysis, this is Westwind, and this was not necessarily a protocol, but kind of the framework that Dr. Rabinowitz had talked about that really, I think, showed me or demonstrates, I think, the power, not only in what the numbers will demonstrate, but also in terms of the potential that I hope is realized once we have this audit. And it's actually quite simple in terms of the 3 questions that he will ask initially to folks who are doing data work are the results that you have in front of you expected? Are they explainable? And then the last one that is really the meat of the work, because it involves, either supporting or refreshing or renewing culture, is it acceptable? And as we go through, as I've had this conversation with them, to say that it hasn't influenced some of the work that we're doing with our data already, and putting it into a reframe that I personally have never used before, it is something that I just wanted to include in my report, and has been, in terms of, quite powerful. Again, not just in terms of looking at the data, but looking in terms of ultimately what is our overall impact currently, as well as what do we want our impact to be moving forward, and really then digging deep into, if the answer to expected yes and explainable yes, but acceptable no, that's where the real work begins. And that's, again, what we've been working on in our past 2 weekly meetings in terms of the equity audit. And because we have a lot in our presentation agenda, that concludes my report. There are no.
I just have a
I have a
question.
question. Oh.
About the Westwind process, because they asked us for for names of people in the community they might want to contact, and I gave them some, but I've been asked by people if they've started that process because they haven't heard from them. Do you know where they are in that, or is that not started yet? Is that?
It should have started. I know that we've also talked about some of those contacts and as well as contacts in terms of the school committee who were unable to be interviewed when they were in town and setting up those meetings. I will double check on Monday when we meet again.
Okay.
I can, yes.
So, I have a question on the intramural form. You have, Mr. Sorrow, as the supervisor for many of the intramurals, but you also have him on the personnel action form as taking a leave of absence. So it just seems like, there's not,
So the contractual appointments in terms of intramurals were created before the leave came on in, and because the leave, I don't have details of the to be determined right now in terms of how long that will take.
do you have a plan for a supervisor to take over when Mr. Sorrow's not, while he's on leave?
Right now, I would have to defer to Mr. Lynch, but at this time, I don't have an answer for you in terms of how we're going to tackle that.
Any further questions for Mr. Pagazza?
So I'll make a motion to accept the superintendent's report.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a discussion and action on a school committee member moves the board, a recognition service. And I would like to start off with going all the way back into 2020, when we were running together with a seat at the table. And I was scared to meet her personally. I didn't want to meet this person that was my rival, the person that that could have potentially just beat me out. But the good thing about it is that we both ended up at this table, and it has been a wonderful, inspiring 4 years of watching her work at this table. Not only does she stand up for our students and our families, she also stands up for our colleagues, me being one of them. And as a family, as a community member, I'll turn to Melissa for letters to help me to be able to move along on my career path. No questions asked. She produced that letter. So grateful for that. So grateful to have had her be one of the people that I've sat at this table with for the last 4 years. And I really would hate to see her go, but sometimes we must move on. And I'm happy to stay and continue to do the work that we started together. So good luck, Melissa.
I have a certificate presented on behalf of the South Kingstown School Department for Melissa. Certificate of appreciation proudly presented to Melissa Boyd in recognition of your outstanding dedication and exemplary service as a member of the South Kingstown School Committee. Your commitment for years has greatly contributed to the growth and success of our students and community. Your leadership, vision, and tireless efforts in advocating for educational excellence have made a lasting impact. We are grateful for your service and the positive change you have fostered within our district. Awarded this 22nd day of October 2024.
We will go down the table and, I mean, you can say something. Okay, so we'll go down the table and let the other 5 of us say something, and then we'll come back and circle around to you, Ms. Boyd. Thank you.
So Melissa, we have been through a whole lot, a whole lot. And it's hard to put to words the different emotions that we've experienced over time. Sometimes we were lockstep, sometimes we were definitely not. But the one thing that I can say that I appreciate the most is your level of, your demeanor, your level of respect always. The way you carry yourself, the way you speak, the way you bring your truth to the table. And then also as a school committee member, as a board member, sometimes people get lost in their own personal, we're a body and no matter what, the vote goes one way, the vote goes the other, but that's the vote and we move forward and we do what's best, always putting the children first. And you exemplify that. So I appreciate these past 4 years working side by side with you. Like I said, we don't have to rehash any of our past traumas, but we've been through a lot and it has been a true pleasure to have you sitting literally by my side while we've navigated these waters. So thank you.
So I'm gonna miss
Miss
you.
Betta.
Gonna miss you
Miss
so
Betta.
much. Oh,
I do apologize. It's Ms. Russo, she wanted to say something personal, so I do apologize.
So I first met Melissa Boyd when she first decided to run for school committee in a pandemic year. So we met behind masks and outside and not having any close interaction and for fear of spreading something. And so personally, I would like to express my gratitude for your hard work and on our school committee, the knowledge that you have brought to this table. And that, like Kate said, that, you are always, when you have something to say, it's always said respectfully. And I would also say, I will miss you.
um, you know, I really think that you've done such a wonderful job and brought so much to this committee. Your work on policy has been exemplary. It has been such an honor to work with you. I think we bonded most with DLI. And so we've been through some hard things together. And no matter the outcome, you've always stood up for what you believe in for the students of our district. And I so admire that. And I've learned a lot from working with you. So thank you. And, the biggest thing is I wish you would have run again, but thank you for your 4 years of service.
So I just want to start out by saying that you were one of the first people I spoke to when I was considering running for school committee. So I appreciated your insight and your feedback on what it takes to be at this table. And in my time here, you've you know, we've heard the word exemplary a few times. I think it's worth digging into that a little bit because you really are an example of what it means to be a committee member, to be professional, to be respectful, to move past disagreements when it's important to do so as a body. And I definitely have looked to you as a role model on the policy subcommittee. As the chair of that subcommittee, I looked to you as my role model. That's how I hope to run those meetings going forward and any other committee I may chair in the future. So really appreciate your expertise, insight, and just demeanor and everything. So thank you so much. And we will definitely miss you at this table.
As everyone has said, I want to thank you for your focus on the students and especially the students who not everyone sees in our community. And I think a lot of that work has been through, you know, doesn't sound exciting to be on the policy subcommittee. Sounds like maybe even worse than the finance committee in terms of excitement level. But you know, dusting off policies from the 60s and 70s is something that takes not only some persistence, but also an understanding of how meaningful they are, because in many cases, they were statements to the community about what the attitude of this committee, what kind of district we're going to be, and that we were going to be open and welcoming to everyone. And we are going to support the students and families who often get left behind. So that work was extremely important, I think. So thank you.
They just said my turn. So I am not someone who likes to be in the spotlight like this. So I did try and write down my thoughts, but thank you all very much for speaking. I did not expect that. So what I wrote is I want to sincerely thank everyone who is here tonight for being engaged what I feel is arguably our community's most important work, and that's ensuring that SK's children receive an outstanding public education. I am confident when I say that we are in a stronger place than when I first sat at this table in 2020. We are less divided and more focused on student success, collaboration, and our commitment to actually live up to our espoused values of equity, community engagement, and excellence. There is still much to do, and I trust you all to do that, but I am proud to have played a role in moving the needle on our building projects, our policies, and our shared understanding of what it means to be a part of an SK community that values and truly values education. I am grateful to my colleagues at this table who have served by answering the call for stability and professionalism in our community when it was much needed. I want to acknowledge my faith in our current district leadership, our building leaders, our teaching staff, our support staff, and our administrative staff, especially Terry, for their commitment to my own children and every child in our district. I want to thank the community for placing your faith in me 4 years ago as a new name on the ballot. There were many people who were willing to help me in the process of even running and convincing me to do so. Friends who were willing to write letters of support, walk neighborhoods, and even entirely build marketing campaigns. Some of you are in the audience, and not to mention to support me. And strangers at the time who were willing to host conversations, open their homes, and offer strategies for success. I am grateful for your kindness, but more so for the opportunity you trusted me with. While I teach leadership and organizational development professionally, this role has been a tremendously challenging one and a profoundly humbling one, but one that has solidified my passion for education and service. I hope that others will find opportunities to use their talents and skills to better our schools and community, and I have faith that they will. Finally, this is the hard part. I want to thank my family. My husband is an outstanding person and public high school educator, and someone who I would support 100% if he ever chose to serve. While I had the chance, I had to say it. While I had the chance to sit at this table, he ensured that my home, my pets, my children were cared for and carried the extra responsibility of sports, events, concerts, dinner prep, homework, and bedtime routines. Not to mention talking me down after a few particularly challenging evenings. Thank you, Jason. And to my children, I want to say that I took on this challenge because I have the utmost faith in each of you, that you are the future of our community. I have tried to demonstrate that it is important to work for what you believe in, even when it is hard, and to stay committed to something when at times it would be easier to walk away. While I have not been happy with every decision at this table, I hope that I was able to show you that there are ways to navigate conflict that can lead to a better outcome for all. Most of all, I hope that I made you proud and that you too are willing to lead and serve and make your schools and community a better place. Thank you and best of luck to my colleagues in the upcoming elections. And thank you for all that you have done and for your future efforts. Now enough about me. Let's get back to work. Thank you.
Okay. Even with leaving, she expresses the example that she set at this table. So we'll move on to the next item on. I'm sorry. Did you all want to say something? We can say it. But, next item on the agenda is the Office of Teaching and Learning update. And I'll turn that over to Ms. Seeger.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the school committee. I would be remiss if I did not pause for a moment and just also, express my gratitude to Ms. Boyd for the warm welcome here in South Kingstown, and certainly wish you the very best in your future endeavors. So tough act to follow for the Office of Teaching and Learning update, but we will certainly dive right into continue the conversation related to the topic of the night here, which seems to be around data. So with that, we can jump right into the Office of Teaching and Learning update, which is around a first look at our state assessment results, and in particular, kind of a narrower focus around the impact of chronic absenteeism that we have seen kind of jumping off the page in our early dive around the data. So next slide, please. So again, just to review again, that is really the purpose of tonight's presentation, that looking through the lens of chronic absenteeism with the hope and promise that as we move forward, we are able to share some more specifics related to the achievement results. And just for those of you following along at home, as promised in the draft timeline that we saw in our previous Office of Teaching and Learning update, those RICAS, PSAT, SAT, and GSA, those results were made public just this past Friday, along with a formal press release from the Department of Ed. So again, kind of hot off the presses. Next slide, please. And again, for those of you who are interested, there is a URL there. Should you want to access the public data portal and take a peek at those assessment results from 23-24. Next slide, please. So as I noted earlier in the presentation, one of the data trends that was captured in not only the RIDE press release, but also in the commissioner's statements related to the impact of attendance, and in particular, chronic absenteeism with respect to the context around our assessment results statewide. And there is a definition that's captured up here around what exactly is chronic absenteeism in terms of, a public school district with 180 school days. That would account for 18 or more school days missed, would be that chronic absenteeism rate. Next slide, please. So you might be asking, why are we leading with a conversation around chronic absenteeism? Well, when we follow the research and the evidence around the impact of chronic absenteeism, we can see an association with a number of adverse or negative consequences listed here, starting first and foremost with that lower achievement piece, along with a series of other concerning consequences as a public school district. So certainly, in terms of a leverage point, focusing on chronic absenteeism is something that we feel is critical for us moving forward. Next slide, please. Thank you. So something new in this year's public data release is there's a link here that you can follow that will take you to a public portal whereby you are able to look at data, a crosswalk of attendance and achievement. And in just a few moments, I'll walk you through some examples of that pertain to us here in SK. But that public portal, through that URL there, allows you to see all LEAs in Rhode Island public-facing data. And next slide, please. So to bring it back to our local data here. So in our, and Mr. Pedraza and I, in our early dive into the data results, again, following that press release that helped to build the context around attendance, we decided to look closely with the time that we've had since that public release to focus in on what does that look like for SK in terms of 23-24 school year in particular. And I can kind of walk you through what you're seeing here, but essentially you have your RICAS scores, that's grades 3 to 8. That's all students who took the test, which was close to 100% of all 3rd through 8th graders. And I would direct your attention to the portions of the table with those highlighted figures. So just, some data points that stick out. We had last year 118 out of 170 students who were chronically absent. So that's 18 or more absences. We had 118 of those 170 not meeting expectations versus the 30.6% who did. And you can kind of walk through this table and see that rather glaring gap as it relates to achievement in terms of chronically absent versus not. And of course,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to clarify that 170, the 118 students out of the 170, that's just of the 170 who are chronically absent.
that
That's
is correct.
Total students.
Yes, yep,
Just
that's
making that little distinction for anybody who's following along.
definitely. And,
Thank
it's not lost on Mr. Pedraza and I that, we've been immersed in looking at this for, a couple of days. And for those of you first looking at this, it is a lot of data to unpack. So I appreciate that question and that point.
And,
Yep.
and just a little bit more clarity.
Sure.
So this is overall during the school year and not on the day of the bias type of thing.
That is correct. Yes. So this is throughout the 180-day student school year.
Oh, thank you.
Yep, good question. And so you might be asking as well, why is there a discrepancy between the total number of chronically absent students for ELA versus math? You see that figure of 170 versus 166. So one thing that I wanted to point out to the community was that there are instances where students do not take both RICAS tests. They're actually given roughly a month apart. One usually starts in April, the ELA, and then into May, the math testing will happen. So there could be a variety of circumstances that lead to a student taking one and not the other, up to and including, a medical excusal, There's also, depending on when a multi-language learner enrolls in the district, a multi-language learner would only take the math test and not the ELA test. So those all factor into those total test taker numbers that you see reflected here. So I just wanted to get ahead of that question as well. But we can go on to the next slide. And so what you see here is really just boiling it down to, what does this mean from the previous slide? And just looking at that far right column, clearly you can see, the achievement gap between the chronically absent students and not chronically absent students, to the tune of 19.6% and 24.5% respectively for ELA and math. So not insignificant, and certainly, worthy of our attention and focus, and something that we will indeed incorporate into our work moving forward. And next slide, please. So we didn't want to just stop at RICAS. We also wanted to offer you a glimpse into our PSAT data as well as our SAT data in a very similar fashion. So as you know, our PSAT data is based on our 10th graders performance. So here we see, again, similar impact with respect to that performance gap. And we can jump to the next slide, please. Again, brass tacks here around PSAT. You actually have some increased gap figures here related to chronically absent and not chronically absent. And next slide, please. And then moving into our 11th graders, juniors here, and looking at the SAT data, again, we see that same iteration of achievement gaps and that same association between chronic absenteeism and achievement playing out in our local SAT numbers as well. And again, we can move to the next slide.
Sorry, my microphone's very loud. Just had a quick question about the PSAT and SAT on the chronically absent for both. The ELA numbers seem significantly better than the math numbers. I wasn't sure if you had any insight into that yet. I don't know if you crunched that far into it at this point, but it did jump out at me that the PSAT and SAT meeting and exceeding was both for chronically absent above 50% for both a PSAT and an SAT for the ELA portion, but the math portion is significantly worse. Just wasn't sure if you had any insight into that.
So in most cases, it's conjecture at this point. However, when we're taking a look at our starting points of overall proficiency, our ELA starting points and the number of students who are proficient, also in terms of when you start getting into the SAT and PSAT, you start getting into concepts that have not been encountered before when you start to get into high-level statistics, pre-calculus, trigonometry, whereas elements of writing, structure, support, thesis statement, supporting claims with evidence are strands of ELA that transcend, conjecture in terms of at this point. We haven't dug fully into those students to see, okay, what are they doing in terms of their academic achievement? Are they here for just not enough of the day? But again, in terms of, because we see this trend throughout the state and through other districts going on, the best guess is that the applicable, the skill of writing that as well as the advanced or the proficiency that's achieved at earlier levels is carrying some students through on these tests. The only other point that I just wanted to make to the larger community is that we're bringing this up because the N is not insignificant. This is, I mean, we're in we are well above the N of 10 for that kind of public disclosure here. And when we get subgroups or we take a look at student groups of this nature, that while it is not as simple as just coming to school, in some cases it is. And we sometimes have a potential to overcomplicate things. And so while that we don't know all of the reasons why all of those students were, and some may be excused absences, there is no differentiation there between excused and unexcused medical versus truant. So that, that it is strictly based off of the N, but again, with such a large N size, to then say, okay, if we could get even a small fraction more of those students to school, and if for some students it is about showing up and being exposed to things they have never been exposed to, the gains that we believe we can make are not insignificant. I'm sorry, Mr.
Is it, sorry, it's one grade that's taking the SAT, is that right?
Yes, this is data based just off of the school day SAT. This does not account for students who take it in their senior year or take it over the course of the summer.
So this is almost a quarter of this class that's chronically absent. I don't know how many, it's over, a little over 200 students per class, right? And there's 49, if you go back a slide. Sorry,
Yes,
there are 49 chronically absent.
Yep, by the end of
One
the school-
grade, so that,
yep.
yeah.
And by the end of the school year. So they might not have been chronically absent. So again,
Before the
that
SAT,
level of
okay.
before then, but by the end of the school year, yes.
Anyone else with questions? Then I'll ask mine. Just not really a question. A comment about the math. So if you're, it's kind of anecdotal, but it's my life for 48 years. If you miss 2 days a month, what was taught on Monday, you need to understand that before in math, before you can do what's taught next Monday. And I think that impacts the math, having the students that are not there be more significantly, their scores be more significantly low than in the ELA. It's my understanding that the PSAT continues to be primarily algebra and geometry, being given in grade 10. And the SAT incorporates the more advanced math, a little bit of pre-calc. I don't think we see any calculus on the SAT.
Well, thank you again for the comments and questions related to these past slides. And I took a series of notes, and so I think just a couple of things stood out to me in listening to Mr. Pedrazza's responses as well as the questions. But if you recall, in the previous, in our last meeting, we had talked about how in past years, we've been able to, with RICAS anyway, we've been able to drill down to specific items and look at released items and be able to, again, have another data source to help us answer that question of like, why, what do we see here? And if we do, engage in that data protocol of continuing to ask that, those exploratory questions, why, and try to get to that root cause. We're in kind of a different place, I think, as it relates to this year without the item analyses. But having said that, part of, and I'll get into this in just a few moments, but, our data work will, that's not going to necessarily get in our way in terms of us wanting to continue to dive deep into the data that, again, see what is the story here. I do know we will have access to, specific items and the standards that are reflected or skills within those questions. So I think that much can be learned and will be forthcoming in terms of what that reveals, in terms of, where do we need to continue to do what we're doing in order to get those outcomes that are desired, and where do we need to enhance what we're doing. And just, one last point. When Mr. Pedraza and I were talking leading up to this presentation, and ultimately, what we see in terms of attendance is it's about access. It's about being here to engage in that skill development and be practicing that and receiving that high level instruction around that, high quality curricula. And when you're not here, you are coming in and there's bound to be gaps in terms of what you miss. And that is something that, again, we feel is incredibly important to address.
And the only last point I'll bring up is that we will now be crosswalking this, because this is actually a question for parents in the community on survey works. One of the state questions, do you feel that missing 2 days a month will negatively impact your child? And so we can crosswalk that to now with data. Not only do we have data in terms of students who are chronically absent, but we will also, RIDE is also providing us now with a data analysis of students who go from chronically absent to not chronically absent, and the gains that they make just by coming back to school more frequently. Now, again, it's not a panacea, but just getting back to school on a regular basis does have positive impacts. And again, this is just touching the surface. So in terms of what this dashboard can do, in terms of student groups, in terms of grade level, we can break all of this down. But again, speaking in general terms, what I am excited about here, though, and I think that in Mr. Seeger's next slide, we'll talk about this, is that this is something that we as a school community and a community can do something about. This is something that affects schools and that the schools can take action, but at the same time, families and the community can also take action. And that ultimately the solution to remedying having students come to school, the solution lies within each and every one of us. And that's an exciting piece. It's not something that is, just placed onto one person, one group, one organization. So, I digress. Mr. Seeger.
Thank you, Mr. Pedraza. And we can move to the next slide, please. So again, back to that point around next steps. So there's much that we are excited to do and engage in related to our assessment data and around, to Mr. Pedraza's point as well. I'm glad you mentioned the survey works piece, because that is another data point that we can crosswalk with and look at some of the attitudes and beliefs and mindsets around attendance and other factors that may or may not impact that. So, again, bringing it back to where do we go from here? So, just at the school level, clearly, this latest round of assessment data will play a pivotal role as it relates to, the school improvement planning process happening at each school through the site-based management. And that would include, again, doing deep data dives at the specific school level. And then, the other piece that I wanted to make a mention of is, the interventions around attendance. So each of our building principals has and teams at the schools have worked incredibly hard. And I learned a lot about, the many practices that are in place in terms of supporting positive student attendance and avoiding chronic absenteeism. So I certainly, I'm looking forward to seeing those interventions continue. And then from the Office of Teaching and Learning, working as a team to see, are there opportunities for us to enhance that? Are there other supports that, Office of Teaching and Learning can provide? And then certainly, communication is key. I know there are systems in place that I spoke to, from the district level along with the school level, and I would look to see the continuation of that communication around chronic absenteeism in the form of, direct communication with students and families related to if we're trending in that direction, to get ahead of it, knowing what we know. And then finally, one note that we wanted to leave on was around the work being done at the state level in terms of supporting students and families with regard to attending school. And actually on the next slide, if you can go to that one, there's 2 links here that we wanted to share, where the state, the Department of Ed has put together a pool of resources available on both of these sites related to how students, families, as well as LEAs can have a collection of resources to help make that positive impact on attendance. The other piece is that coinciding with the press release around the assessment data, the state also announced, the Department of Ed announced a partnership with a mental health telehealth service available to students in Rhode Island. So we're looking forward to learning more about what exactly, how that service, what it looks like and how we're able to leverage that within our own community as needed. So those are some exciting developments in terms of, what the state has offered in terms of support to LEAs who, again, looking at the trend data across the state, we are certainly not alone in this. So, we look to, continue to, use best practices related to enhancing attendance and to, again, keep tabs on, what is happening that is evidence-based and research-based and has some proven efficacy around improving attendance and seeing what makes sense to either continue doing here or perhaps, bring into our suite of practices. With that, we can go to the next slide. And I know we've definitely stopped for a few questions, which is always encouraged, but if there are any other lingering questions or comments.
Great. Ms. Russo?
Just have a comment. One thing that as an educator, completely shocked me a number of years ago. I had a student in class who was chronically absent. And districts were not talking about chronic absenteeism, but I saw his grade tanking. And I felt he could do way better than that. So I called mom. And mom said to me, but Miss Brusso, he makes up all his work, doesn't he? And I said, yes, he takes the tests he misses and blah, 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 blah. I said, but he misses the classroom discussion, the extra conversation we have about a particularly tough topic. He was not in an easy class. And this was probably November that I called mom. The kid was never absent again. And he's a teacher now.
Just to piggyback on that, I'm looking at the next steps slide, and yes, district-wide, we need next steps. Yes, statewide, we need to embrace those, but number one next step is school. And the communication piece belongs in the school level also, because that's where it really needs to happen. Getting a call from Superintendent Pedraza or the Office of Teaching and Learning, it's impactful on a parent. You're like, oh, but why didn't my teacher call first? Right? Or why didn't I get that email? Or and nowadays there's so many ways to communicate with our teachers and our teachers with our parents and what have you. So I'm curious with the next step at the school level, where it has intervention and specifically the school improvement teams and the school improvement plans. I'm curious and if it's not there, then I would love to see it there. Is there for every school in our district a goal in their school improvement plan to increase or decrease, sorry, decrease chronic absenteeism.
So we'll be taking a look at those, and we had what this does do, and we can go back from previous years. We've been focused in on just the most current one. What we'll also be doing is as I had mentioned in my October update, we'll also be putting out in terms of communication, the survey out for parents and the community, and that communication will be broken, or the soliciting feedback in terms of from your school, are you in terms of the teacher level, the school level, the district level. And so we'll be getting feedback in terms of that communication and the level of report or a data point to crosswalk and then bring back to principals and or school improvement teams as a potential either baseline data point to continue or to address. You're welcome.
Thank you for this, Nick. Appreciate looking at it. Spent a little time since this came out, probably a lot less than either of you, looking through the RICAS data, and the attendance was not something that was, the issue is not something that's obvious to me, but it makes sense to focus on it because it's such a large cohort of students that are affected by it. But when I'm looking at the data, I think we also have some very small cohorts that are seriously impacted and slipping, it seems to me. So, you know, I look at African-American students, students in special education, students in economically disadvantaged households. And if you look at our data by race, white students, they're meeting and exceeding cohort increased by 4%, African-American students decreased by 9%, which means our African-American students are achieving at a below the state average for African-American students. And we're in the top quartile of overall of districts. So I bring that up. I understand why we would start with attendance because it's such a large group, but I'm sure there's likely some intersection between those groups that are also falling behind. And if we don't point out the places where we are struggling at the beginning, then we're not going to address those problems appropriately, because it would be easy for us, I think, to institute attendance improvement systems for white middle class kids, because that's what most of our students are. And there could very well be different solutions needed for kids who are African American or from economically disadvantaged households or from special education, in special education. And if we don't put those at the front when we're beginning to create solutions, I don't think we're going to create solutions for those kids. And we're going to do what I think we've often done, which is focus on our largest group of kids, white middle class kids.
Certainly appreciate that. And in terms of the big picture takeaways, that those are things that, as I call up the sheet, that we're seeing as well, and that we are taking a look at. And that we have to take a systemic approach from everything to calling home and as we'll hear in a little bit, in terms of taking a look at our program of studies and what we're offering, and taking a look at student engagement and student representation. And do people see themselves in the community? Do they feel safe, supported at school? Do they feel this is a safe place? So it is definitely a multi-pronged approach, but it is not lost on us. And I have it here in front of us in terms of as we take a look at our student groups and see some of that decline, with some growth in some areas, especially in terms of mathematics. But it is certainly a dive that we're going into, and it's not going to be an easy one. And the other piece that in terms of that absenteeism, both pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, as well as the health component, in that many cases, this is not, what I don't want to do is say, this is not about, in some cases, students who just won't, who don't want to come to school. This is in many cases, students who physically cannot bring themselves to get to school. And that's why we highlighted that mental health component. But in terms of, while we'll take a look at it, and we're taking a look at the largest buckets right now, we will certainly get in there to make sure that ultimately that last part of, is it acceptable The answer again is no, and the solution is going to lie at every individual. It's not going to, we're not going to say, well, we did something because we think this had the greatest impact and that's enough. We're going to keep on doing and trying to do everything so it works for every student.
Any further questions or discussion on this? Okay. Thank you. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a discussion and action on South Kingston High School programs of study, and we have Dr. Gear here. Mona?
Good evening, everybody. Hi. I want to start by thanking Eric Lonergan and Barbara Crudale. The PDF that you have with the draft of the program studies. They spent a lot of time actually editing that. It was not easy, so want to thank them for that. I also want to thank all of our instructional coordinators. They were given the task of helping us put this program of studies on a diet, which was the recommendation of this committee last year. So they really took that to task. They worked with me. They worked with their respective departments, and they did that. I think you'll see, and our program of studies is in a really good spot now because of that. So wanted to start by thanking all those people. Okay, so we can go to the second slide, please. So it is always the case, courses that run will be based on student interest as well as graduation requirements. I mean, some students would love to take none of our graduation requirements and just get 24 credits however they want. However, we can't allow that. I actually have to, as you know, at the graduation, attest that they've met all the state requirements. So we do have to have that caveat going on. However, we want courses that students want to be in. And so one of the things that we did was we looked at the last 3 school years worth of data. So it was like what classes were running and how many how many classes ran in the last 3 years and sections and so forth. So that was good to have that. That helped us to make decisions. And going forward, I think what has kind of happened is, and this committee sort of predicted that last year, we reached that tipping point where you had so many offerings that we were wind up having to have all these conversations. You talk about communications, but conversations with families about, we can't run this course. Only 8 people signed up for it. And so there's no reason to start things off so negatively. Because while you may be crystal clear that this is an interest survey that we're trying to figure out what your students can take next year, but it doesn't. But they're seeing like, this is the course I'm taking next year, right? So when it's like, no, it's not available for whether it's because it doesn't fit in their schedule or because we just don't have enough students to run it, we don't need to start off on that in that negative way. So a reminder to you that the adjusted graduation requirements for the class of 2028 and beyond include 2 credits in world language, the same world language, one of which can be taken at the middle school level, 4 in math. So that means 4 classes that must be taught by math certified teachers. And we've gotten very creative with that. These were courses that you approved last year, like math modeling, sports analytics. Those are classes that kids are liking. We've already got them on board. So in other words, if students that want to go algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, they have these courses to take for their 4th. So in addition to pre-calcing and calculus. 0.5 in the arts, this is fine or applied arts. Plus proficiencies in computer science, financial literacy, and civics. Okay, so that is for our current freshmen and on down. New courses replacing old courses are yearbook. So this is a course that we've talked about for a long time. We had an advanced photography course that this is going to replace. It's going to still involve that advanced photography skill set, but this is going to be an opportunity for kids to take this once or multiple times they want to be involved with the yearbook during the school day. And it feeds into a club that we have after school too. So I think it's just going to make it a better yearbook altogether. Psychology of Criminal Minds. This is a course that would be a follow-up to psychology. computer science exploration. This is a course that will run as a quarter-length course, and it will meet the computer science graduation requirement. Football and American Culture. It's a literature course, if I could speak. And that course is going to be one that's sort of an update on some other courses that were not as popular. So this is something that we're hoping will attract more kids to taking another literature course. And then college and scholarship writing. So this is for students that are looking for that extra help in their beginning of the senior year, that they can take this quarter-length course and get some additional assistance there. So
Can I ask a question about this?
absolutely, yep.
I understand what it means to get a credit, but I'm not sure how proficiency is defined.
Mhm.
But-
So this computer science exploration course has to hit 6 modules that the state says are part of that, a part of the guidance that says this is how you meet the computer science proficiency. And so this course will do that. Students that are in the computer science program won't need that. The CTE program won't need that, but we don't have every student taking that. So this is to make sure that everyone has that in a compact way, but also some really interesting modules that everyone really should have exposure to.
I've got a very similar question to piggyback on that. So I can understand how civics can be kind of embedded in social studies classes to meet proficiency. So how does one attain financial literacy proficiency? What classes would one take for
That's
that?
a great question. So there is a module that every student at a minimum needs to show proficiency with, and that is embedded specifically into our 11th grade health class. So it fit nicely into their curriculum, and so they took it on. The teachers went to get training. They teach that as a module. It's an online module, but with their support. And so every student, if they haven't everyone has to pass it because it's part of that class. But then there's other students that obviously can meet it multiple ways too. But at a minimum through Health 11, you meet that. And we tried it at first in Health 12, but it seemed like, we shifted this year to Health 11 because it was a better match. And civics is currently met in 2 ways. Yes, it's embedded into the social studies curriculum, but it's also part of the senior project course that students take in senior year. Yep.
To make Dr. McGee, a couple of questions, if you don't mind. The math requirements. The students have to take algebra 1 and 2 and geometry.
That's correct.
And so they might get 2 of those courses at the high school and 1 in the middle school.
Correct, but then they still have to take 4 courses at the high school
they-
by a math certified teacher. Yep.
Okay, that's.
Yes,
my
so
question.
a typical path would be for an accelerated student who's doing that at the 8th grade level, algebra 1 in 8th grade, geometry in 9th grade, and then algebra 2 in 10th grade, pre-calculus in 11th grade, and then calculus in 12th grade.
But if they take algebra 1 in 8th grade and are successful, they still have to take 4 math courses at the high school.
Yep. And so let's say a student decided after algebra 2 that they wanted to take math modeling 1 year and sports analytics another year, they could certainly do that to graduate.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
The yearbook course, the new yearbook course, is that a fine arts course?
It is, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. And last slide. Okay, so just to summarize, how do we continue to provide substantial offerings to students with declining enrollment? So drop courses that 3-year data shows students are not taking. And this can be a combination of 2, a teacher retired and all of a sudden the passion for the course was there, and students certainly get attracted to elective courses where teachers have a passion. So, or just interests change, the world changes. So 19 courses dropped from last year to this year. Now, some of those are semester based and some of those are year long, but as I had said, you kind of gave the directive, put it on a diet. Well, we did. So consolidate courses that have limited student interest. So we've gotten to the place where we really can't run 3-4-year languages, meaning 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the fourth being an AP or not, depending on what a student wants to do. But rather than going to 2 languages, we've landed in a place where Italian will be a 2-year accelerated track. So students who have mastered another language or are on their way to mastering another language could pick this up as another language. Or it could be for students that just want to push themselves and they want their 2-year world language requirement to be a 1-2 class, and then we will bring on the 3-4 class the following year. So it's to give us flexibility with that. And our goal is to keep 3 languages at our high school. And then pop, piano, and guitar. So this year, for example, we had to make a choice between running a guitar section or a piano section. So the teachers got together and thought about, well, why don't we offer it together? And then the kids can learn both or focus on whatever they want. So they came up with pop, piano, and guitar. So these are the types of things that our teachers and our led by our instructional coordinators kind of got very creative with. So that was fantastic. And then another thing is alternating courses that compete for the same student population. And in the document you have, you'll see years listed. This is running this year. This is running that year. So if AP Chemistry and AP Biology are competing for the same students, don't run them in the same year. Especially with the declining enrollment, run them in alternating years, but let the families know, let the kids know that this is running this year. So if you want to take it, you got to take it that one, and then the other one will run the other year. So that's some of the stuff that's going on there too. So that's how we're trying to keep as many electives as we can without that disappointing nature of like, sorry, we didn't get enough kids. And that's the general overview.
Dr. McGee, the Italian 1 and 2 accelerated. I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. That's for all 3 of the languages that are currently offered, right? Or
No, so
just the Italian?
Spanish will stay as Spanish 1, Spanish 2, Spanish 3, Spanish 4. And then French will stay as 1, 2, 3, 4, but Italian will be 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay,
And keeping in mind, one thing I want to clarify, the students that are already on that 4-year track will still have the ability to stay on that 4-year track. This is coming online to replace that ultimately. So so for the students coming up next year, they would not have a choice of a 4-year Italian track, but students that are already in a 4-year Italian track can stay in that 4-year Italian track. We'll just have to phase it out, sorry.
Okay, so the 1 and 2 accelerated, Italian 1 and 2 are going to be taught in 1 year? Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep. So it's accelerated, but
Yeah, it's fast.
but it is, but it's just the realities of where we're at student population wise. And we want to try this rather than move to 2 languages.
And I have faith in our 4 language.
Yeah, no, they're willing to give this a go.
So in your first year, you would take Italian and it would cover the curriculum for Italian 1 and 2. And then you would get a second year because they need 2 years in 1 language. So it would be 3 and 4. And would there be a possibility of AP Italian or not?
Yeah, so that's something we've talked about. So AP Italian is going to be offered the next two years because we have to for the students already in that track, it's going to be there. So in 3 years time when we would be having this discussion, it would be focused on we only get right now about 3, 4, 5 kids that are taking it. Could you fit several students into that accelerated class? And so they're in that accelerated, the 3, 4 accelerated a second year where, they're taking the AP, going for the AP credit in that particular year. So almost like a dual talk class at that point. So.
Right. So let's say you have a student who is a 10th grader in that 3-4 class. Would they have an option of taking the AP Italian test in May at the end of that sophomore year?
In theory, but when I talked to them, they felt like most students would not be ready for that at that point in time. Then another year in that case would be, but it could just be you're in the class again. You're not technically taking 3-4 again. You're taking it for AP Italian credit at that point. If a student wanted to explore that. Right now, and this is the reason that it's Italian and not Spanish, or why it wasn't Spanish is because it really has to do with how many kids are right now taking it. We were looking at our data. There's just not that many. We're already teaching a class this year that is has mid-teens numbers, and it's got AP students. It has Italian honors 4 and Italian 4 all in one class together. So they're getting, we're getting creative there, and they're willing to adjust for students like that. So that's probably how it would look like, but the plan is to offer it the next 2 years because we do have a good number of kids in the Italian 2 level right now.
I just want to thank you, the teachers and everybody for working hard to keep Italian in the school. I think that is very important. Maybe there's a way to have, we used to call them 199 courses back when I was in school, but kind of a self-directed class where even if you just have 1 or 2 students that want to take AP, they could repeat that class as an AP student, have a special thing. Maybe we can look at that kind of opportunity for these students that a specialized plan.
That's essentially what I was saying. Yeah, like I maybe I didn't say it very well because how late in the day it is, but that's I agree with you. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Any further questions for Mr. Gare? No? Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Next item on the agenda is a discussion and an action on the approval of the Rhode Island Department of Education memorandum of agreement on the school construction and okay, over to Mr. Gaza.
So in your packets, you have a letter that is actually addressing both action items or items D and E in that consolidated memo from Chris Spiegel. Additionally, I've spoken to council, district council, and he, after reviewing the MOAs, Andrew had no concerns, no changes, and said this is standard operating procedure and our standard documents that come with the necessity of school construction and that are required once a bond is passed, as well as for those communities who will might take advantage of PAYGO, and that this was as straightforward as it comes is from Mr. Hennius, and then from Mr. Spiegel goes into a little bit more generalized detail of what you're being asked to enter into today in both items. So the recommended motion that would be for both, which I know right now we're only talking about item D, but the recommended motion for both would be similar in that the South Kingstown School Committee approved the extension of both memorandums, or in this case, the memorandum of agreement for school construction with the Rhode Island Department of Education.
Ms. Boyd?
So for the sake of discussion, I'll make a motion that the South Kingstown School Committee approve the execution of the memorandum of agreement regarding school construction for the Rhode Island Department of Education.
Second.
Any discussion, Ms. Vetta?
So Kate, I hope you might be able to answer my question. So under section 3, it has approved values that equal 150 million. But my understanding was 150 million was going to be for the new high school and the athletic fields. And yet breakout here is for the high school, the athletic fields, and then repairs to the other buildings. So it might be just that this is the way that this memorandum is done, but they're still using the whole 150 for those 2 projects alone, or this is the reimbursable part. And I I guess I'm looking for some reconciliation between those numbers.
So this is the way the wording of the bond was. And so it's just, it's coming with a memorandum of agreement to follow that. This isn't changed. Nothing has been added, subtracted, moved around. This is all that. It goes right back to the wording of the bond from the stage 1 and stage 2 to make sure that we're able to use the accelerated reimbursement for any projects. But our project is for the high school and the athletic field. That
Okay,
helps.
so,
It just is mirroring the bond language.
right. So, and I get that, but this doesn't tie us to say, oh, of the 150, we have to use 6.5 on the hazard building. It
Correct.
doesn't do that.
Nope.
However, if we have money left, we can apply 6.5 to the hazard building and be reimbursable.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
At that accelerated.
So it's
percentage.
like win-win.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
And
Could-
it goes for both.
We could also take money we have in reserve funds or other capital money, any capital expenditure to these buildings will be, we'll be able to get those extra funds. from
Correct.
state.
Yep.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. Next on the agenda is item E, and that is the other part of the statewide bond pay-as-you-go memorandum of agreement. We'll need a motion and then we can discuss.
I'll make a motion for the South Kingstown School Committee to approve the Rhode Island Department of Education statewide bond pay-as-you-go memorandum of agreement.
Second,
Ms. Feta?
so again, I'm gonna ask Kate, because I think she has all the answers on the building stuff. And I also want to thank you for all the work you're doing, chairing the school building committee. So, so the approved project cost of 27.8 million. So that is the design fee. It says design fees and other soft costs. So that's of the 150 million they've gone through and said these are design costs and certain costs are in that approved project cost number. Is that what I'm reading?
So I'm not going to be able to, I'm not the authority on this particular pay-as-you-go. We have a discussion constantly between the town council, school building committee, school committee, and many other folks for a distinct understanding of this particular, the pay-as-you-go versus the approved project costs. So I'm not sure, Ryan, if you can speak to this, or usually Chris is here to do the interpretation on my behalf, but.
I'll do my best to not make it more convoluted, but in simple terms, it's as we submit invoices to the school building authority, we can be reimbursed the percentage that, the 52.5, whatever it is in the final MOA. We can be reimbursed that percentage of that invoice as we invoice. Does that make sense? So we're receiving reimbursements as we progress through the project, as opposed to waiting for the school to be handed over, so to speak, fully constructed, then getting those housing aid reimbursements after the fact. These are as the building is being constructed.
Correct.
That's
and
my understanding.
And I
as-
believe they choose the design because it's the first phase, the first things you're actually invoicing out. Therefore, it's they want you to get the money first, right? So I understand. Okay, so we're good. My next question, when I take that 27.8, this 9.7, which is the pay-go offering, is at 35%. If we're reimbursed at 52.5%, why is the pay-go at 35%?
That's a great question that I'm not prepared to answer at this moment, so I don't want to give you bad information.
And
it
it just
could-
maybe
yeah,
rides what they do.
Yeah, it could be a ride provision where the pay as you go is the lower rate. as opposed to the housing in, which is at the higher rate. I'm not exactly sure.
And it may be because they don't know we're going to fulfill those other things till the end of the project. And I'm just,
It's good speculation. So
okay.
I apologize. I don't have the more concrete answer for you.
Okay.
It also might be because until often some of those bonuses, you don't know if you're going to get those bonuses until the project has been concluded.
Right. Yeah, that's what I just
Yeah.
said.
So-
But yeah, good. Okay. Which makes sense. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm interpreting what I'm reading correctly. So that's good. It makes sense. Now the question I have is, do we know has anybody made a decision on how we're using the PAYGO funds? Which isn't our purview because they go to the town council, but are they going to be used for the cost of the bond? Are they going to be used actually to pay for these early phase costs?
You nailed it. It's the purview of the town council.
And they haven't done a thing.
As far as we know, it's possible that they have discussed this at council meeting. It's possible it's been discussed at school building. I'm not sure. So
The topic comes up at school building all the time because we want an answer from the town council. So we're kind of giving that directive pretty much every meeting, like we need to have that conversation and we need all the people in the room, school finance, town finance, left field, everybody who has input needs to be in the room to try to explain how this is going to play out.
Ooh, great. And that, again, nothing you can do about it if it's the purview of the town council. I can understand why we have a memorandum of understanding at the school committee level with RIDE. But since PAYGO is under the purview of the town council, are they going to have a memorandum of understanding as well? Or how does that work? Or is it only us? So we're signing that we understand this, and we're good for it, we're making a contract, but then we don't get the benefit of that contract. The town council does. I just want to put it out there.
sure. It's a great question. My understanding is there's one MOA with the school committee.
Okay, okay, thank you.
If it helps, there will be a robust conversation on this eventually, and we'll get those questions answered for everybody.
I guess I just keep going back to, we're paying for things, we're making the contracts, we're doing all of this. At least the things we're paying for, we should get the reimbursement on. And I really hope that we can have a conversation with the town council regarding these things. So first of all, I need to understand, and you did a great job, both of you helping me understand it. I don't understand why I don't understand all the way it's set up, but thank you. I appreciate the answers.
Do have a motion on the table. So it's everybody, if there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes. Yeah, but the last item on the agenda was a school building committee update. And I think we kind of, unless Kate has something further to add.
We did, I mean, there's not much to update on at the moment. We've had discussion about let me kind of reset my brain here. So what has been going on currently is the test finally kicked off this week, or last week, I'm sorry, and has been ongoing. It should be wrapped up as far as everything cleaned up, put back to where it belongs, like we were never there. And we won't have the results from the test probably for another couple of weeks. Those will be brought obviously to the school and the town, as well as the school building committee. I want to make sure we're clear though. This is a test. We may pass the test. We may be told, yes, you can do geothermal. That doesn't mean it's an automatic yay, we're going to do geothermal because we also have to come up with a way to pay for it. There are discussions, Left Field has communicated with myself and Luke Murray of ways that there are organizations out there that are helping kind of mitigate that and do kind of some grant funding to help with getting that paid upfront so it's not coming out of our pockets, and that it kind of is like a gap between paying upfront and when reimbursements come from the state in 3 years. So those discussions are ongoing. The fingers are still crossed that yes, we will be good to go with geothermal, but it's not a guarantee that it's going to happen. I just want to make sure everybody's kind of crystal clear on that. It's exciting to go through the process, but also we want to make sure that we have all our ducks in a row. So that's been ongoing. It's going to be wrapping up soon. We are going to be having a community forum that will be presenting schematic designs to the community in November. And I just want to make sure I get my dates right before I say them out loud. So we have a school building committee meeting on November 6th at 6 p.m. And then on Wednesday, November 13th at 6 p.m. is going to be our next community forum where we're going to have schematic designs presented to the community with some pictures. They're not going to be final, there's nothing final about schematic design. We're not quite there yet, but there will be some designs that are going to be shared with the community. Our architect engineers will be there. Our owner's project manager will be there. It'll be a nice, robust discussion. It will be held in town hall chambers at 6 p.m. It will be live streamed, but it will only be in-person participation. So there won't be question and answer going on Zoom or anything like that, but you'll be able to watch it. There will be a form sent out ahead of time if people have questions ahead of time that they want to submit, but it will only be in-person participation in the room. I believe that is it. So there we go.
For those updates, if nobody has a question for Kate, do we have a motion, Ms. Busa?
Kate, I would just like to personally thank you because I know the work that you're doing is like yeoman's work. And I do think that it's not a bad idea for us to continually bring up why is our money going to the town?
I look forward to town and school joint sessions around budget and funding so that we can continuously ask that question.
With that said, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes at 8:46.